In today's episode, we have reached a point in time when Deep Purple enters a new era. It's either considered the Mark VI or Mark VII lineup, depending on whether you consider the Satriani lineup to count as its own mark. I'm not going to discuss this. Feel free to argue it in the comments amongst yourselves, but we have reached a point where Deep Purple has found a new guitar player, so let's start there. Last episode, I left off with Ritchie Blackmore leaving mid-tour and Joe Satriani joining the band to fill in for the remaining slots on their tour. But Satriani didn't want the permanent position, which meant they needed to find a replacement. The way it went down was pretty interesting. Apparently, the band held a meeting with management and decided to see if Steve Morse wanted to join. Roger Glover had previously seen the Steve Morse band play live in Florida and was impressed by his playing. So Deep Purple contacted Morse's manager and asked him if Morse wanted to join Deep Purple. Morse said yes, and it was almost a done deal at that point. They didn't hold a formal audition. They had him play with the band at a few gigs in Mexico City in November 1994 just to test their onstage chemistry. According to Roger Glover, the chemistry was instant. After their first show in Mexico, the band knew they had found their guy. Steve Morse wasn't Blackmore. His presence was very calm, and he was open to collaboration. He would eventually go on to become the band's longest-serving guitarist, being in the band for 28 years. But I'm getting way ahead of myself, so let's talk more about this situation. The writing and recording process was the opposite of what they were used to, especially during the Mark II reunions. It was calm and collaborative. There's no drama, which the band was probably not used to. When it was time to write and record the album, they went to Altamonte Springs, Florida, as they wanted a break from the cold European winter. They booked Greg Reich Productions, which would become their home base for the next few years. Sessions took place on and off from February to October 1985, with short breaks for touring. Actually, let me correct myself. It's actually 1995. So if you watch a lot of music documentaries like me, you know whenever a new guy joins a band from the outside, they tend to treat him poorly. But this is not the case. They welcome him with open arms, which would have been a good line if I had been talking about the band Journey. But anyway, in other words, they made him feel like an equal partner. They had open jam sessions. Roger Glover would keep this DAT recorder running just in case they caught something worth developing. Steve Morse was no Ritchie Blackmore clone. That is to say, he had his own style. He came from more of an American fusion, progressive rock background, and that came out in his playing. He was a big fan of pinch harmonics, something that could be heard on tracks like the opener of Vavoom, Ted the Mechanic, and Somebody Stole My Guitar. This is something that had never been part of Deep Purple's sound. He also added more acoustic and Celtic folk arrangements on tracks like The Aviator and A Touch Away. He also used something that guitar players have named after him called the Morse technique. It's an alternate picking style. I'm going to be getting a little technical here, but Morse didn't use hammer-ons and pull-offs, otherwise called legato. He played every note individually. He also treats the guitar knob as if it were a pedal. He does something called volume swelling, where he'll strike a note with the volume down, and then he'll roll it up with a pinky finger. Kind of creates more like this violin-type sound. There were two singles, one promotional radio single released to introduce Steve Morse to Deep Purple fans or anyone else who didn't know about him. They were Sometimes I Feel Like Screaming, The Aviator, and Vavoom, Ted the Mechanic, the latter which was a radio promotional single. Sometimes I Feel Like Screaming was released as a proper CD single and widely considered the album's masterpiece. The single edition featured a shortened radio edit alongside the standard album track, and it became a live staple for years. The Aviator was released as a single in select European markets. It was one of their lighter sounding songs, had more of an acoustic, Celtic folk-inspired arrangement, and Vavoom, Ted the Mechanic was the promotional radio single that helped with the album's launch. This was one of their harder rockers, featuring pinch harmonics and Ian Gillan's spoken word style delivery. The song is based on a true story about a chatty stranger that Ian Gillan once met in a bar. Back in the 80s, they were recording in Vermont, and Gillan slipped away to grab a drink at a local bar that was just called The Pub. He just wanted to have a beer and play some pool. A random man sat next to him and just told him his entire life story. Gillan wrote down snippets of the man's rants on napkins. He then stuffed them into an idea book that he had forgotten about for many years. And then later on, he discovers the napkins and he turned them into a song. According to Gillan, he used his imagination just to put everything together. For example, the guy's name really wasn't Ted. He really wasn't a mechanic. But the guy was complaining about all the injustices in his life, which included a micromanaging boss, an ungrateful family, annoying neighbors, and overregulation by the government. Some fans have interpreted the line, "A banjo player took a hike," as a jab at Ritchie Blackmore, as Gillan used to refer to guitarists as banjo players, but that can be open to interpretation. And by the way, this guy in the picture, I don't think he's the guy, just a random guy I found on Facebook just for the purposes of this video, just to clarify that, in case this random guy happens to be watching my video. The album was released on February 5th, 1986 in Europe and the UK, followed by a North American release in April 1986. The album arrived during the height of the grunge and Britpop eras, which severely hindered its commercial reach in the West. In the United States, the album failed to chart at all. However, it found significant success in mainland Europe, peaking at number 3 in Sweden and entering the top 20 in Germany. In Deep Purple's home country, it had a modest showing, entering the UK albums chart and peaking at number 58. Critics and fans widely praised the record as the album that saved Deep Purple by making them an active, creative force instead of a nostalgia act. Reviewers noted that Ian Gillan's lyrics were creatively revitalized when freed of Blackmore's shackles. Fans were very skeptical of anyone filling Blackmore's shoes. However, Morse won them over, not by trying to copy Blackmore, but he played with his own style. The album lacked a massive commercial radio single. The album successfully pivoted Deep Purple's business model from relying on massive sales to sustaining global prominence through relentless high-demand live touring, which is the next chapter. The global tour supporting Purpendicular ran from February 1996 through late 1997, serving as the official live introduction of new guitarist Steve Morse. It was highly celebrated for restoring the sense of joy and improvisation to the band's stage presence, effectively saving Deep Purple from becoming a stale nostalgia act. The toxic atmosphere of the final Ritchie Blackmore years vanished. Members openly smiled, jammed, and interacted on stage again, so there's no flying water bottles, no storming off stage, and no spaghetti fights backstage. There was also no dress code. In a famous nod to Morse's casual American style, the band explicitly told him there's no dress code on stage, contrasting Blackmore's rigid all-black aesthetic. Morse enthusiastically agreed to play older songs that Blackmore had banned for years, revitalizing the energy of classic deep cuts. The average setlist was a calculated blend of massive 1970s classics, rediscovered rarities, and heavy representation from the new record. Songs like Boom, Ted the Mechanic, Sometimes I Feel Like Screaming, and Cascades, I'm Not Your Lover became instant night-to-night favorites. The tour brought back Ian Gillan era gems like No One Came, Pictures of Home, and When a Blind Man Cries, songs Blackmore historically refused to perform. Tracks like Rosa's Cantina and The Aviator were initially thrown into rotation, but inside a month had gone for good as the set list tightened. While arena tours in North America were a thing of the past, the band played packed, high-energy shows throughout Europe, South America, and Japan. One notable show was Live at the Olympia in '96. The show was recorded in Paris. This highly praised live album captured the raw energy of the tour. It featured a full brass section on several tracks, hiding the band's willingness to experiment. There was also a 1996 concert recorded in Poland, later released on DVD, immortalizing early raw versions of the Morse-era tracks. So that's the story of Purpendicular. The album might not have all the drama as many other albums had, but it's the band entering a new era. The next album would be called Abandon, and will be the last album for one of their original members. Some of you know who it is, but I like to leave my episodes with a cliffhanger for those who don't know. So that will be next. But before I do that, I have to check in on David Coverdale. And apparently he wanted to release a solo album in 1997, but the label made him release it as Whitesnake. So that's going to be the next video. And that's coming up. Check out the Deep Purple playlist. Should be on the screen right now. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe and all that good stuff. I will see you in the next one.